the handcuffs were already out when Detective Martinez realized he'd made a terrible mistake. Karen Whitmore stood triumphant on her manicured lawn, watching what she thought was my arrestant, till the officer turned toward her house instead. The swimming pool that had started this war was gone, but the secrets buried beneath it were about to surface, and Karen, she had no idea she'd just orchestrated her own downfall. Marcus Rivera had learned to read trouble in people's faces, and right now, Trouble was standing on the sidewalk with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. Karen Whitmore, Neighborhood Watch, Captain, HOA board member, and self-appointed guardian of property values, was watching his excavation crew with the intensity of a hawk circling prey. "This is highly irregular," she called out, her voice carrying across his front yard with practiced authority. "You can't just dig up half your property without proper permits." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and set down his shovel. The August heat was brutal, but Karen's presence made it feel suffocating. His crew, 3 guys from Reliable Excavation, had been working since dawn to remove the old in-ground pool that came with the house he'd bought 6 months ago. The concrete shell was cracked beyond repair, and the pump system had died years ago, leaving behind a stagnant green mess that bred mosquitoes and complaints. "I have permits," Marcus replied, pulling folded papers from his back pocket. "Filed them 3 weeks ago with the city." Karen marched across the invisible property line like she was crossing into enemy territory. At 52, she carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who'd never been told no and didn't plan to start now. Her white tennis outfit was spotless despite the heat, and her tan spoke of country club afternoons rather than honest work. "Let me see those," she demanded, snatching the papers before Marcus could object. Behind her, Marcus noticed her husband Gary lurking near their front door, a thin, nervous man who seemed to shrink whenever his wife raised her voice. Poor bastard probably hadn't won an argument in 20 years. "These permits are for pool removal only," Karen announced, as if she'd uncovered some conspiracy. "Not for whatever ... archaeological dig you're conducting." She gestured toward the deep hole where his crew had been working. They'd hit something unexpected when breaking up the pool's foundation, what looked like an old concrete slab, buried much deeper than any pool should go. "We're following safety protocols," Marcus said patiently. "When you find unexpected structures, you have to excavate carefully to avoid damage to utilities or neighboring properties." "My property," Karen snapped, "which you're probably damaging. With all this heavy machinery, I'm calling the police." "Ma'am," interrupted Jake, the excavation foreman, "we're licensed and bonded. Everything we're doing is—" "I wasn't talking to you," Karen cut him off without even looking in his direction. Her eyes remained fixed on Marcus like laser sights. "I'm talking to him. The one who moved into our neighborhood and immediately started tearing things apart." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd faced this attitude before, the assumption that because he was Latino and worked construction, he didn't belong in a neighborhood like Willowbrook Estates. Never mind that he'd saved for 8 years to buy this house, or that he ran his own successful contracting business. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said carefully, "I understand you're concerned. But it's Mrs. Whitmore to you," she corrected. "And yes, I'm concerned. Property values in this neighborhood have been carefully maintained for 15 years. We have standards." The dig crew had stopped working to watch the confrontation. Marcus could see the familiar mix of anger and resignation in their faces, men who'd dealt with Karen Whitmore's before and knew how these encounters usually went. "The property is mine," Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the anger building in his chest. I can improve it however I want, as long as I follow city codes, which I am. Karen's laugh was sharp and humorless. We'll see about that. Gary. Her husband scurried over, like a summoned dog. Yes, sweetheart. Call Thompson, at the city planning office. Tell him we need an immediate inspection of this project. And call our lawyer. I want to know what legal options we have for stopping with this. Gary nodded eagerly, pulling out his phone. Marcus noticed the man's hands were shaking slightly. While you're making calls, Marcus said, his patience finally fraying. Maybe call someone about that dead tree in your backyard. The one that's about to fall on the power lines. That's an actual safety hazard. Karen's face flushed red. How dare you, Mom? A teenage voice interrupted the argument. A girl around 16 emerged from the Whitmore house, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing running clothes. Unlike her parents, she looked embarrassed by the scene unfolding on the sidewalk. What's going on? The girl asked quietly. Nothing you need to worry about, Ashley, Karen said without taking her eyes off Marcus. Go back inside. But I can hear you yelling from inside. Now. Ashley looked apologetically toward Marcus before retreating. At least someone in that family had manners. Look, Marcus tried one more time. We'll be done with the excavation in a few days. The pool will be filled and seeded, and you'll never know it was here. A few days. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. You expect us to live next to a construction site for days. The noise, the dust, the trucks, the work hours are legal, Jake interjected. 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Karen whirled on him. No one asked you. That's when Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. While Karen had been ranting, Jake and his crew had kept digging around the mysterious concrete slab. And now, looking into the hole, Marcus could see they'd uncovered something that definitely wasn't part of any pool installation. It was a corner sharp, purposeful, too geometric to be natural. And there was something else. A smell, faint but unmistakable to anyone who'd worked construction long enough to know what different materials smelled like when they decayed. Jake met his eyes across the yard, and Marcus saw his own concern reflected there. This wasn't just an old foundation or forgotten utility connection. This was something someone had buried. Something someone had wanted to stay buried. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said slowly, his tone completely changed. Maybe you should go inside. But Karen was beyond listening to reason. Don't you tell me what to do on my own. She stopped mid-sentence as Gary's phone conversation became audible. Yes, Officer Martinez, this is Gary Whitmore, on Elm Street. My wife wants to report illegal excavation. What? When did that happen? Are you sure? Gary's face went pale as he listened to whatever the police officer was telling him. Karen snatched the phone away. Officer Martinez. This is Karen Whitmore. I want to report. What do you mean there's been a development? What kind of development? Marcus watched Karen's expression change from anger to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. I see. Yes, we'll be here. She hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment. What did he say? Gary asked nervously. Karen looked up at Marcus, and for the first time since he'd known her, she seemed uncertain. He's coming over. He says there's been a development in an old case, and he needs to inspect our property. What kind of old case? Marcus asked, but Karen didn't answer. She was staring into the excavation hole, where Jake's crew had just uncovered another section of whatever was buried down there. And the smell was getting stronger. "Everyone needs to stop digging," Marcus called out. "Right now." Jake nodded and signaled his crew. They climbed out of the hole, leaving their equipment behind. "What's wrong?" Gary asked, looking between his wife and Marcus. Karen finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 years ago, when we first moved to this neighborhood, there was a family that lived in your house. The Hendersons. They disappeared." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Disappeared. One day they were there, the next day they were gone. Middle of the night. Police said they probably just moved without telling anyone. But, double quotes, she trailed off. "But what?" Karen looked at him with something that might have been real fear. "But they left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, family photos, even their car was still in the garage." The sound of sirens broke the afternoon quiet. Police cars, plural, were approaching fast. Marcus looked down into the hole where his crew had been working, where they'd found concrete that shouldn't be there, buried deeper than any pool foundation had any right to be. And suddenly, Karen's desperate attempts to stop the excavation made perfect sense. She wasn't trying to protect property values, she was trying to protect secrets. The first police car pulled up just as the wind shifted, carrying that unmistakable smell up from the hole. Detective Martinez stepped out, a weathered man in his 50s with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He took one look at the excavation site, caught the smell, and immediately reached for his radio. "This is Martinez. I need the coroner's office and a forensics team at 1247 Elm Street. Priority 1. Karen Whitmore, the woman who'd spent the entire afternoon trying to get Marcus arrested for illegal excavation, slowly backed away from the hole, but it was too late. After 15 years, the Henderson family was finally coming home. Detective Martinez had worked homicide for 12 years, but he'd never forgotten the Henderson case. Cold cases had a way of haunting cops, the ones that never got solved, the families that never got closure. Now, standing in Marcus Rivera's backyard with the acrid smell of death rising from a 15-year-old grave, he felt the familiar weight of justice, delayed but not denied. "Nobody touches anything," Martinez announced to the growing crowd. 3 more patrol units had arrived, along with the coroner's van and a forensics team. Yellow tape was already sectioning off the excavation site, turning Marcus's property renovation into a crime scene. Karen Whitmore stood frozen on her perfectly manicured lawn, watching her carefully constructed world collapse one shovelful at a time. Her husband, Gary, had retreated to their front porch. Phone pressed to his ear as he whispered frantically to someone, probably their lawyer. "Mrs. Whitmore," Martinez called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd questioned 1,000 suspects. "I need to speak with you." I don't understand why," Karen stammered, but her usual commanding tone had evaporated. "This is his property, not mine." She pointed at Marcus with a trembling finger, as if he were somehow responsible for what lay buried beneath his yard. "Ma'am, you called in this excavation as illegal activity. You seemed very concerned about what Mr. Rivera might find. That makes me curious." Marcus watched the exchange from beside the police tape. His excavation crew had been moved back to the street, their equipment impounded as potential evidence. Jake kept shaking his head and muttering about 30 years in construction and never finding anything worse than old septic tanks. "I was concerned about property values," Karen insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "The noise, the disruption." 15 years ago, Martinez interrupted. When the Henderson family disappeared, you were the one who reported them missing. Do you remember that? Karen's face went white. That was different. I was being a good neighbor. Tell me about that night. The detective's tone was conversational, but Marcus could hear the steel underneath. This wasn't a request. There's nothing to tell, Karen said quickly. They were there one day, gone the next. People move all the time. People don't usually move without taking their children's stuffed animals, Martinez replied, or leaving their wedding photos behind, or abandoning a pot roast in the oven. The forensics photographer was already documenting the scene. Camera flashes illuminating the excavation hole like lightning. Dr. Sarah Chen, the county medical examiner, had arrived and was conferring with the dig team about the safest way to recover whatever was down there. Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Chen called out, approaching with a clipboard. I understand, you've lived next door for 15 years. Yes, but I don't see why. Would you happen to remember if the previous owners did any construction work? Concrete pours, foundation repairs, anything like that? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Marcus noticed sweat beading on her forehead, despite the shade she was standing in. I wouldn't know about that, she finally managed. Because, Dr. Chen continued, we're looking at a professionally poured concrete slab down there. Someone who knew what they were doing. Someone with access to concrete, rebar, maybe even construction equipment. Marcus felt puzzle pieces clicking together in his mind. Gary Whitmore worked for Pinnacle Construction, had for 20 years, according to the neighborhood gossip. He would have had access to materials, equipment, knowledge of how to pour a foundation that would last. Detective Martinez, Marcus called out. Can I speak with you for a minute? Martinez walked over, his notebook already out. What's on your mind, Mr. Rivera? Gary Whitmore, Karen's husband. He works construction, has for years. Pinnacle Construction on Industrial Boulevard. The detective's eyebrows raised slightly. That's so, and something else. When I bought this house, the realtor mentioned the previous owners left suddenly. But she also said something about the pool being installed right before they disappeared. Said it was one of the last things they did to the property. Martinez turned to look at the excavation site with new interest. So someone installs a pool. And then the family vanishes. And underneath that pool, is something that was buried with professional-grade concrete work, Marcus finished. Karen must have overheard, because she suddenly started backing toward her house. Gary, we need to go inside, now. But Gary wasn't listening to his wife anymore. He was staring at the police activity with the hollow expression of a man watching his past catch up with him. His phone call had ended, and he was just standing there, shoulders slumped in defeat. Mr. Whitmore, Martinez called out. I'd like to have a word with you as well. Don't say anything, Gary. Karen shrieked. Not until our lawyer gets here. But Gary was already walking toward the detective, moving like a man sleepwalking toward his own execution. Gary, stop. Karen's voice cracked with desperation. Think about Ashley. Think about our family. That stopped him. Gary turned to look at his wife, and Marcus saw 15 years of guilt and fear written across his face. I am thinking about our family, Gary said quietly. I've been thinking about nothing else for 15 years. Sir, Martinez said gently. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Gary interrupted. And I know what's down there. Karen let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She grabbed her husband's arm, trying to pull him back toward their house. Gary, please. They can't prove anything. It's been 15 years. They can prove everything now, Gary replied, gently removing her grip. Thanks to him, he nodded toward Marcus. I always wondered what would happen if someone tried to remove that pool. Marcus felt sick. You built it. You built the pool to hide what was underneath. Gary nodded slowly. Tom Henderson owed some very bad people a lot of money. Gambling debts. They came collecting one night, and things got out of hand. You killed them? Martinez asked. No. Gary's voice was sharp. I didn't kill anyone, but I helped clean up afterward. Karen was pregnant with Ashley, and these men said if I didn't help them, they'd hurt my family too. Karen was sobbing now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Gary, stop talking. Please, stop talking. They were already dead when I got there. Gary continued, as if confession was a dam finally bursting. Tom, his wife Linda, their 2 kids. The men who killed them needed the bodies to disappear, and they knew I had access to concrete equipment. So you buried them and built a pool on top, Martinez said. Gary nodded, made it look like the family just left town. Moved their car to the airport, made it seem like they'd flown somewhere for a fresh start. Karen helped sell the story too. The neighbors. I was protecting our family. Karen screamed. I was protecting our daughter. By covering up the murder of 2 children. Dr. Chen had approached during the confession, her voice cold with professional disgust. You don't understand, Karen said desperately. Those men would have killed us too. They said they'd come back if we ever said anything. And for 15 years, you let everyone believe the Hendersons just abandoned their life here, Martinez said. Let their extended family wonder what happened to them. Marcus thought about all the times Karen had complained about his renovation work, her desperate attempts to stop the excavation. She hadn't been protecting property values, she'd been protecting herself. The irony, he said aloud, is that if you'd just left me alone, I probably would have filled the pool with dirt and never dug this deep. Your own paranoia is what exposed the truth. Ashley Whitmore appeared at the edge of the crowd, having returned from her run. She took in the police cars, the yellow tape, her sobbing mother, and her father in handcuffs, and Marcus watched a 16-year-old girl's world shatter in real time. Dad, she called out, her voice small and confused. What's happening? Gary looked at his daughter, the child he'd claimed to be protecting all these years, and Marcus saw the exact moment when the full weight of his choices hit him. I'm sorry, sweetheart, Gary whispered. I'm so sorry. As the police led Gary toward a waiting patrol car, Karen made one last desperate play. She pointed at Marcus with a shaking finger. This is all his fault. She screamed to anyone who would listen. He's the one who dug them up. He's the one who destroyed our family. Detective Martinez paused in reading Gary his rights. Ma'am, your husband just confessed to being an accessory to quadruple murder and helping dispose of the bodies. Mr. Rivera here just solved a 15-year-old cold case. Karen's face contorted with rage and desperation. You're all making a mistake. Those people were criminals. They deserved what happened to them. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Gary, sitting in the back of the patrol car, looked at his wife with horror. Mrs. Whitmore, Martinez said quietly, you might want to call that lawyer now. Because accessory after the fact to murder carries a pretty serious sentence in this state. As the patrol car pulled away with Gary inside, Karen collapsed on her front lawn, the weight of 15 years of lies finally crushing her perfectly maintained facade. Marcus stood in his backyard, watching forensics teams carefully excavate the remains of a family he'd never met but somehow helped bring home. His pool removal project had turned into something he'd never imagined, not just a renovation, but a